Hello and good evening. I'd like to call to order City Council Workshop, August 2nd, 2021 in the community room. We have 4 items on the agenda. It's a pretty packed agenda, so we'll try to keep it to time. If we are running over on any one topic, we'll bring it into the communications section of tonight's meeting starting after 7. First up, public safety study presentation. Derek Belanger.
Thank you, Mayor. Derek, come on up,
Bill.
and whoever else coming with you. Appreciate it, Mayor and Council. So we're very excited to present the study that's been worked on. We have representatives from Woodard and Curran here, and then the team that's been working on this, our police chiefs and 911 staff as well. So we'd like to go through the presentation, and Derek, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I can start off with a little history and background on how we got here. In 2017, the public safety team, Woodard and Curran, Simon's Architects, we completed a space needs analysis and site evaluation for the potential of a public safety building, and reviewed several options around the city as potential options. The results of that report came back that Central Fire at Minot Avenue at the time was the best location. In 2019, knowing that construction and funding were several years away, we had money allocated in the CIP to address some issues with the police department here at City Hall. So we put a bid out to try to renovate locker room space and areas downstairs, and the bids came back much higher than we anticipated. So rather than dump more money into a temporary solution, we decided to reallocate the money toward a more comprehensive study for a public safety facility. And as we looked into that more and sites more currently, we found the same thing. We found that the location at Central Fire was the best fit for this facility due to current existing infrastructure, the size, geographic location, and we found that combining the two, police and fire, was beneficial, that we could share a lot of resources. So the chiefs are here tonight to kind of speak about some of the challenges that they have in each of their departments.
Yeah, I would start. I know that most of you were able to get a tour of all of the firehouses last November, the November before, shortly after election, and saw some of our challenges. And I'd kind of break them into 2 real areas, and primarily being the safety area associated with our facilities challenges. Modern, purpose-built fire stations have come a long way. The 2 primary killers of firefighters currently in line of duty are cancer and cardiac events. So we've taken trying to take a lot of proactive steps for cancer prevention in the department, but one of the big design recommendations are that you separate your living spaces and your equipment storages from your diesel components and your exhaust, right? Diesel exhaust is a big causer of the cancer. We want to get our PPE away from there, but the PPE in and of itself carries some carcinogens with it from fires, and we don't want that near our living spaces and those types of things. So as you saw in a lot of our facilities, everything is commingled. For example, at Engine 2, it really is just a garage, and immediately beside the exhaust pipes to those trucks are the bedroom doors, right? So that safety and cancer prevention is a big part of it. On the cardiac health standpoint, we certainly think it's very important that all of our facilities have the ability for a minimal amount of physical activity or workout to be able to occur. That's an important piece. We also think all of our facilities, we know all of our facilities have the need for some kind of office or workspace. The amount of paperwork associated with our job is tenfold what it was in the 50s when these facilities were built. So our reporting requires that we have those facilities. And then lastly, we certainly are encouraging and trying to drive and are getting a more diverse workforce. And our facility spaces need to be accommodating for a diverse workforce. with regard to sleeping quarters, bathroom facilities, and all of the things that are needed in a firehouse. The other major sub-piece that I think we really have a facilities need for, and we've talked about this previously, is operationally, there's a big need to relocate our tower truck from the Center Street station to Central Station. Center Street and the district that it covers has a lot of rural area around Lake Auburn and in North Auburn without fire hydrants. And that tower truck does not, it has 300 gallons of water. That's about 2 minutes of firefighting time. Historically, there had always been an engine in that district, but that engine was taken out of service when we took on EMS transport. And so we're left with a truck up there that really doesn't have the firefighting capabilities and capacities that it should in such a rural district. If we could move that to Central Station, much more of the area that Central Station covers has fire hydrants. That gives us the water capabilities that we need and allows us to relocate an engine up to Center Street. However, the building, the floor structure at Central Station does not hold the weight of the tower truck. So really our operational need to meet the community needs in a safe and effective deployment of fire resources is to try to get that tower truck moved towards Central Station and have a structure that would house that and accommodate it so we can get an engine moved. So, it's firefighter safety, it's accommodating a diverse workforce, and then it's our operational needs to get the right equipment in the right places so that we can do the job most effectively.
Thanks, Chief. As Derek described earlier, the catalyst for this whole project was the fact that we were trying to renovate the locker room area, gym area of the downstairs of Auburn Hall. Auburn Hall was never designed to be a police station. We are year 13 in a 5-year temporary move back when we closed 1 Minot Avenue down due to a lack of capital improvement funding for certain projects up there. With those challenges that we currently have is we have divisions that are scattered throughout the building and makes communication somewhat difficult at times. We do not have a temporary prisoner processing area where we can bring people in to do breathalyzer tests for OUI cases and whatnot. We have to rely on the county or Lewiston PD to use those machines, and it depends on if those machines are up and running or not. So some of those things that hamper our OUI investigations are really beyond our control. And also, not being able to bring prisoners in here safely and effectively through the use of a sally port or a secured garage to be able to move prisoners throughout creates a real issue for our officers and for the public, where we're bringing prisoners in through a public access area, and we try to shy away from that. But given the effects that we've had with COVID and the jail being on somewhat of a lockdown as far as what they're taking for prisoners, it's made that job very difficult. So with that, we are always running short on space for various office staff and whatnot, and the location of a public safety campus on Minot Avenue, it brings us a little bit closer to the center of the city where our response times from that station would be equal throughout the rest of the city.
And joining us with Woodard and Kern is Megan McDivitt to provide the solutions for some of these challenges that we have.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for having me tonight. So back in the fall of last year, in 2020, our consulting team was able to go through a similar walkthrough as you guys have gone through all of the public safety facilities and hear from the chiefs as well as the 911 center, just some of their operational challenges and things like that. And while, based on our observations, all of the facilities seem to be in relatively good shape with respect to structural integrity, electrical or HVAC systems, roofings, and things like that. These facilities that are 40 to 50 years old, it was very apparent that they are not built for current programming and staffing needs of your public safety departments. So we looked at each of the facilities and we came up with solutions that I'd like to just run through briefly here with you all tonight. So if we start at Engine 2 on South Main Street, this is the oldest of your facility. And considering all of the current challenges there, our proposed solution is to build a new standalone facility. This facility would be built to the appropriate size and programming layout to meet current staffing needs. It would also be laid out to overcome many of those shortfalls that Chief Chase talked about today. Things like dedicated bug space, separate living and working areas, safe storage of fire equipment, as well as a drive-through apparatus bay, which provides safety at the site and things like that. Based on our initial site investigation, it does appear that there's sufficient space on the site to build this new building while the existing Engine 2 stays intact. This will help minimize operational interruptions at the facility. The new building can be built, the staff and equipment can be moved over to the new building, and then the old building can be removed and the site improvements finished off to finalize that site. So that's the proposed improvements for Engine 2 on South Main Street. As been mentioned several times, the proposed improvements for Minot Ave is to turn Central Station into a shared public facility. This new public facility would house the police department, the fire staff administration support, the 911 center, which is currently located in the basement of Central Station. So they have no natural light, limited space. They don't have enough room for future growth. We would move them up into this new building so they get some light there. This building would have a shared public entrance and lobby so that the public has one place to go to reach all their public resource needs or public safety needs. And the building would also provide a lot of shared support rooms and resources that are needed for these departments, as well as the city, like things like an emergency operations center. One of the advantages of this site is that it is large enough to support these needs, and it also lends itself for phased construction. We can construct the new shared public safety building on the east side of the facility. Once that's constructed and up and operational, then we can construct a new bay on the west side to support the towers truck and get that out of Engine 5 and move that up to Central Station. We would also propose updating all of the existing living and support spaces in the current fire engine part of the building so that they meet the current programming needs that Chief Chase talked about. So those are the proposed improvements for a new shared public safety facility at Minot Ave. And the final one is Engine 5 at Center Street. The proposed improvements here are the smallest of all of them. It's a small building addition that would provide that dedicated bunk space and improved living areas. And also all of the current living and sleeping quarters would be renovated to meet the current programming and staffing needs. There are no proposed changes to the apparatus bay here, but that is because once the tower truck can get out of this and relocated to Engine 3, then there is sufficient space to hold the engine that is needed to support this district. So I know that's a lot of improvements over quite a few different facilities, so we don't propose doing it all at once. We understand it's going to take time to implement. So right now we're proposing this could be done over kind of a 6-year plan. The proposed implementation plan is to do the design and improvements of Engine 2 first. And the advantage for doing this is that Engine 2 will be larger, the new facility will be larger than the current, and once it's up and running, some of the admin support staff that are currently at Station 3, Central Station, can be temporarily relocated to Engine 2 while the construction of the shared public safety building at Engine 3 goes on. So again, we're trying to find ways to not only implement these improvements, but to minimize operations because these are critical infrastructure and critical staff that can need to continue to support your city during these improvements. So Engine 2 goes first, then we go over to Engine 3. The construction of the shared public safety side, that east side, happens first. Once the staff gets moved in there, specifically not only the police department, but also the 911 center gets out of the basement and up into that shared building. We can then go on the other side of the building and construct the addition for the tower truck, as well as do a lot of the renovations to the living quarters and support spaces of the current fire station. And finally, once Engine 3 is completed, it will then be the implementation of the building addition and renovation improvements up at Engine 5. So over this 6-year period, we're estimating it's about a $27 million investment to do the improvements, design, and everything for all 3 of these facilities. And that is it. So Derek, I'll let it back to you if there's anything else, or Phil.
All right, we can certainly, the team's here to answer any questions you have. I think the next steps for you as a council, what I would recommend, and I'll put it on a future agenda, would be that we create a Public Safety Building Committee, and having members of the public part of that process, and we can formulate that for you, and we'll make that, like I said, available on a future agenda. But we believe that's that next step. I think having a good, strong citizen participation in this process is going to be important. There's a lot here. As Megan said, this is broken down over a 6-year process. So being able to have committees that could then even break into some subcommittees to work on some of these initiatives will be important. Things that we're doing behind the scenes through this process is we're also running our data. We're taking a look at our data for what would change if we were to move the ladder operation out of Central. What does that change for our run times? What does that look like for, the chief has talked about this, and capital improvement discussions regarding what should we be having at, say, engine 5 for an apparatus in the future moving forward, where our challenges as far as providing additional water to certain parts of our community. Some of that should be part of those discussions as we go through with the public, and having a part of that process, and looking at some of our run times and looking at some of our challenges. Touring these buildings will be important, our existing buildings, and then also taking a look at what are the functional challenges that we currently have, and what will this new facility be able to provide for us to improve those efficiencies, create a safer space. We do not, most of these buildings, we have done makeshift accommodations for gender, of increasing our female employees within these facilities. They were non-existent when these buildings were built. So many times they are built in what I would say, well, the old PD, it was built in the old water pump room. That's where one of the female bathrooms were. Some of them have done some makeshifting in some other spaces. This isn't accommodating for our staff, our employees. We need to make sure that we're doing that. And these changes will help that process. So what would be helpful too, if you can be thinking about the makeup, how many, I would love to be able to see, you know, at least upwards of 20 people on this committee. I think that would give a good participation of the public and a good engagement in this process. And I think we have a lot of citizens that would want to participate. But we'd look for you to how you want to make that subcommittee. And it's a work, I would call it a work group, to be able to form that and put that together. But the team's here to answer any questions you have.
Councilor Zone.
Thank you. Are there concerns about the environmental impact of taking down some of these buildings? I know it's not happening right away, but when you talk about Chief Chase, you know, what's going on in these buildings, I imagine there's probably a lot of old stuff around.
Yeah, we'll be doing environmental studies. Actually, this year, we're going to start working on those to be ahead of that, so that way we're not caught with any surprises if we do decide to go forward with this implementation.
Thank you. I really appreciate this plan and support it.
Councilor Walker.
Yeah, I love the plan, but I would like to have some answers on going out towards Kitty Hawk. Wouldn't we have a little better advantage, maybe having something, it doesn't have to be a big firehouse, but maybe a small firehouse that would be out near the Kitty Hawk area and taking in the Danville area at the same time, thinking about that. Because this is quite a little ride, no matter how we think about it. Get into Danville and get into Kitty Hawk in a hurry. So I just want that to be part of the thinking going forward.
So we'll have that data for the work group. Chief Chase and Deputy Chief Fifield, as well as Rosemary GIS, have been running a lot of our data heading out towards Danville and the Turnpike exit. And so we have what some of that looks like. We have what would happen if we were to put an engine in different locations. And so it would be good for the committee to dig into that and take a look at those numbers.
Any other questions? Councilor Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was asked by a constituent, these three sort of departments, I mean 911, police and fire, they're going to be at one location, but they're going to remain separate because a few years back when I was on the council, there was a study done to combine the police and the fire together.
Yes, that study was done years ago when we found that there were no efficiencies in trying to combine those departments, and operation of those departments would be more expensive if we had done a cross training approach to those. So yes, they may be housed in the same building or on the same campus. However, they will remain separate agencies.
Thank you.
Counselor Ross?
Thank you. On this 6-year timeline, at what point do you envision the basement of City Hall being vacant? And what's the plan for renovation to alleviate other pressure in different floors in City Hall? I'm assuming that we're planning on utilizing that basement space again, and what would renovation cost
And the third floor.
look like? And the third floor, correct?
So it looks like according to this plan, it'd be year 5, this building would be vacated, the third floor and the basement areas. And in between now and then, we'd be developing a plan for those spaces.
Great. And I'm assuming that the third floor would be easier and less costly to renovate, to shift for, as compared to the basement.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Counselor McLeod?
I just had 2 questions. One, so was there an efficiency built in with PD and fire department in the same building in terms of sharing facilities, gendered bathrooms, sleeping quarters if needed, and workout areas?
Yeah, there's a lot of that common space that really ends up between the 2 buildings, training room, an emergency operations center, a workout, gym and workout facility. That's where that efficiency of us being co-located comes from. And also some building services, HVAC and stuff like that. There's some existing stuff and infrastructure there that would need to be augmented, but we're starting with something, right? We're not starting that from scratch in a new facility. So there's some economies of scale associated with that.
Perfect. And the other question I had was, as we go forward in looking at this, is it also going to be built in our maintenance cost to keep these buildings up and running and in pristine condition for the next 50 years, so we don't end up having to rebuild them in 30?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that's built into this process and not 20 years down the road that we need to fix something.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
That's going to be standard. That'll be standard on all of our moving forward plans, so that we know what those costs are moving forward, but also what are the costs for maintenance day one on these.
And will we see that broken out in future budgets, maintenance versus new? Great, thank you.
So talking about future budgets, I'm just doing some rough math, because I see how we're breaking out, obviously, the total budget year by construction year and planning year. And I'm coming up with roughly $27 million as is, conservatively planned budget over 6 years. Let's just fast forward to what it's all said and done. If this number stays true, without any additions or changes by the ad hoc group, you're looking at around an increase of $1.5 million in our bonding payments annually for 20 years, which would mean about 75 cents added onto the mill rate in order to cover this cost. Jill loves my math. There's always a 5% margin of error plugged in there, right? But I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that as we're going in, not to dissuade, but I think all the facts on the table, or at least a semblance, a directional, if you would, number makes sense here. Interestingly enough, this leads into a different conversation later on tonight. In order to cover that, you're looking at roughly $55 million in new valuation to be added to the city in order to cover that additional cost. So it would keep the mill rate at 0, if you would, 0 increase. So just something else to think about, as we're looking at these enhancements to our city, what do we need to do to fund them with new revenue streams versus our existing taxpayers' obligation? I think that will be more of a conversation as we keep going. So do we need any action at this point tonight? We've talked about this. It's come down to the formation of a work group at a...
Yeah, hearing no opposition to that, that'll be the next step, is that we'll come before you at the next meeting, authorizing the formation of a work group. Mm-hmm. And just so folks know, even though we're breaking this out, this still warrants going to the voters for a vote on this. And so plan on, if this continues to go through the process, the council continues to kind of green light this, I guess you could say, as we give the facts back to you, then we would look to probably next November, to have this to the voters.
So right now, we're not looking for any council action approving or disapproving any type of funding for the facilities for public safety. But we will have a vote coming up on to approve or not approve the work group formation. Okay?
I've got
Fair
a
enough.
question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're going to wait till next year, we're forming the group, and we've got consultants, how much is that going to cost? And have we already budgeted for all these incidental costs?
Derek, how much should we budget this year?
We have 200,000 budgeted in the CIP.
And that's covered up there, right in your chart, actually, $200,000 going out to June of 22, end of the fiscal year.
So we look at, as you approve budget items, then that gives us the green light to move forward. So that was budgeted, we'll move forward with that, that's for this year. And then obviously, as we prepare the budget for next year, there'll be additional planning. If that continues moving forward, then that will continue to advance. It's really the large capital bond that will need to go to the public.
That 19 million in year 4 is going to be above our chartered bonding ability by the council, so it'd have to go to the voters.
Does this plan have growth built into it so that if we have additional needs as a community, we have growth, we have additional, development, that this new facility is going to be able to support that?
From our side, I think, the reason we're pulling the data we are with regard to development at Exit 75 and all of those things is, to Councilor Walker's question, is how do we formulate this step? Does that meet our needs? This is to address our current needs and our current facility needs, and determining if there's some augmentation to this to meet future growth as part of that committee work.
Okay.
Whether it's, relocating that station and thoughtfulness of that, and does that achieve our desired, or is there going to be growth that drives a need for another station in that sector of town? We're pulling the data so that we can have, that committee can make those wise decisions. But right now, with regard to the fire stations, it really is about our existing infrastructure. I'm a big advocate that I truthfully believe that firehouses, 2 company firehouses, so you've got, fire and an EMS capability in those houses, is the best model. And then if you have to add another one because you get economic growth in an area of town, you still get that 2-pronged approach to meeting public safety needs. That new station isn't addressed here. Identifying if there's a need would be part of the process.
Gotcha. Okay.
I will say the planning, the pricing and stuff for some of the improvements, like the new station at Engine 2, the sizing of the addition at Engine 5, those do take into account additional workspace, additional bunk space. For example, there is MT services at Station 2. We wanted to make sure we had apparatus bay and bunks to support that in the new building. So these sizing and pricing of these new buildings do include at least improving the growth at the stations as is.
Okay.
I would encourage, when we're looking at these models and we're looking at the adding features, let's say EMT, we have some really good data, and I don't want to quote that because I can't remember exactly, on what happens to the health and wellness of our residents because we currently have EMS services. The survivability rate for Auburn residents that suffer a heart attack is greatly enhanced compared to other communities in this county because of EMS. And I think some of those tangible data points need to be put forth to the committee and us as well, and the public, so we understand that when we're doing this, there's actually a significant benefit to the overall health and well-being of our residents. Councilor Gary, last question, and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Has our comprehensive planning committee looked at the whole scheme of things for the city of Auburn, where businesses, have you guys checked on the map to see what makes sense? Is our industrial zone all where it should be, or should be another part? Should different other zones be switched around? The point I'm getting at is we should probably figure out how we want the city to grow, where things are semi-going, in order to give this committee more data to figure out where the best logistics is and where potential another station may go. Like
We
the
did.
good Council
So
Walker.
we did. We looked at that, and Councilor McLeod's here as well. We looked at that. We looked at growth patterns based upon historics. And we also looked at some of the unknown variables. For example, and the past studies that Mr. Cousins, planning chief, and chief have also contributed to with regards to calls of service by sectors of the city when we're looking at that and increasing. Now, is it exact science? No. There's one thing you can't control, which is market forces. You can tell people to build someplace, but they might not want to build there, and they won't build there, so it's a moot point. But by looking at it and analyzing it and tracking it very closely, periodically, you can actually get a better idea of where that pattern is. And we see those patterns happening around the entire region. So yes, we have looked at it. Councilor McLeod can pipe in if he wants to add anything to
Yeah,
that.
the only thing I would add is we did, and it's gonna come up in a little bit on the future land use stuff, that we look to grow from the inside out where we already have residential services, so that way we don't have to stretch our services as far as, you know, that's why we looked at the density. That gets into another workshop, but that's why we wanted to keep the density where it is, so it meets this need as well.
Thank you.
And I think keep in mind too, this comp plan was an update to the existing comp plan. The existing comp plan does identify the need for a public safety facility in that original comp plan.
And also, in addition to the comp plan, identifying public safety infrastructure needs was part of the 11 recommendations of the city strategic plan that we created 2 years ago. So this dovetails nicely into both the comp plan and the strategic plan as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably about 8 years past due. I'm glad we're actually starting this process off and working on it. So thank you for all your patience, and please, you know, make sure your staff understands that too. And let's see if we can address this in a very transparent and a fair way, and make sure we get good value. So thank you all for that. We're going to move on to the next workshop item at this time. We have Mr. Cousins and I think Mr. John Blais as well from Economic Development and Planning. Talk about residential strips and map review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Also have John Blais here, our Urban Development Specialist, and we wanted to touch base with the council. We brought this item, the text of the council's order, to the planning board last month, brought it back to the council at the last meeting, and as we have learned that there is consensus on the two boards to take a close look at this, develop the maps. We've started developing those maps and really have run into some questions about exactly where we should draw boundaries in different scenarios, different lot depths, where there's other road intersections. And we wanted to walk through a few of those examples tonight and make sure that as we finalize those maps for the public hearing with the planning board, that we are getting those the way that the council would like them. So John will walk through a few examples that were included in your packet.
And Mr. Cousins, and Eric, thank you for this. And I looked at this briefly and looked at some of it prior to the meeting. I want to propose to the council too, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at everything, but prior to looking at it, I would like to make a recommendation that these questions actually be best suited to be answered at the planning board after public comment and, you know, with their skill set on zoning. It's their job. So having the planning board look at the individual questions and answering them on their end and then presenting that as their overall packet of recommendations might make sense versus going through each one of these and having, could be a very long and good, I'm sure, debate on which course of action to follow, yes or no. But I'll leave that up to the council to think about while you go through this. But, you know, I think it's important to trust in the people that do this every day.
And entirely up to you, certainly. We're just looking for feedback. We wanted to make sure we get it right as we develop the maps. I'll let John walk through the different scenarios here. Unless you as a group would rather not to, just let us know.
I'll open that up to the group if you want to walk through the scenarios now, or do you want to refer this all out in its entirety to planning board, or is there a third option?
I want us to work it. I don't want it to go to the planning board until we've had a chance to wait.
Any other comments on this?
Is this also something that the consultant would be reviewing as well? Or are you trying to create parameters for what you want the consultant to be digging into?
Yeah, so we're trying to give the consultant guidance on where exactly to draw the lines based on the text of the council's order.
Any other comments? Remember, it always comes back to us in the end.
Just a general question. Things have come up, and I just want to put them out there. We obviously don't need to address them right now, and maybe Mr. Cousins can think about it. Questions that I've heard have to do with, do you feel like your office and department has had enough time to really dig into this? It's really important that we do this right. Questions, for example, about how much ag land are we using, what difference it's going to make in taxes, things like that. Those are questions that people have asked me, and I don't have an answer for them.
And those are questions that we'll be able to answer as part of the discussion. We really need to know where to draw the boundaries to hit the mark for what the council was looking for, to be able to estimate or run value scenarios and how that changes on a particular parcel, as well as the total acreage of land that's changed.
So let's try a hybrid then. And we go through the criteria. I would love to hear, if council would love to hear, what staff's recommendation is on each one of the criteria. And if the council can very easily come to consensus, say, yeah, that makes sense. Or if it doesn't come to consensus versus debating the issue within a workshop, we send that out to the planning board for deliberation and a recommendation. Council okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, very good then.
You want to walk through the first one?
Sure, this is, the first one here has got the dotted lines, just so you know what we're looking at here. The black dotted lines is representative of the property boundary. And it's got road frontage along that road there. I think it's the Trap Road. But, so what you have there is you've got 3 lots that only go back, we'll say, just for easy math, it's 50 feet. But the purple line represents, yeah, so it's almost easier to stand up and point to it. But that purple line is really where the 750 mark would hit if we extended that. So staff recommendation in this particular case, bring it all the way out to 750 feet. Don't stop at the property line as it's written, only because I think it's better planning to have an equal line across the board there. You've got road frontage that is accessible by the roadway, and if we want, if you wanted to expand and do more development in that area, that may be the better choice. That's one scenario. The other scenario is you stop at the existing property lines along those 3 lots, and then you extend the other part, and it kind of creates a jagged line in terms of planning, in terms of mapping. And you create a void of a parcel of land there that remains agricultural land. So there's a couple of different scenarios there. There's, I think, pros and cons to both of them. And I'll just kind of briefly touch base on those. One is maybe they don't want the development. So, in that there's more, rural residential land that's being created on that particular individual that could increase property values and increase taxes over time. So that's one downplay to that particular case. From a planning standpoint, from a mapping standpoint, equal lines. I think if we look at the history at the 450 and the 750 marks, it was consistent. We didn't take property lines into consideration. So, again, trying to balance either viewpoint. I don't have a stance. I just just looking
But a
uh,
at the direction.
recommendation's a good idea based upon your history and planning.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on that, council?
So
Suggestion, agreement?
yeah, I had one, going to the 750 line, going to that purple line creates that big block into 2 zones now, correct? And the 3 longer tombstone land masses there would all be in residential.
That's correct.
But that would still create that line. We're just extending the residential portion of that larger block, but not all the way to their back line, only to the 750, and then the back lots of those 3, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, comments on this? We do have about 7 or 8 of them. I think we have to go to 6, so.
I think that one there, though, the 750 is what was suggested, and I think I was the one who probably suggested the 750. I would rather that stays the way it is. You've got the 400 right now, which does the same thing as what the 750 is going to do. It leaves you that extra space behind the dotted line, if that's what we call it. 750 should be where we stop.
So 750 should be where we stop. Okay. Is there any other?
Providing they got that much land to go back.
So it seems like we got agreement, at least a couple. Okay. Counselor Gary?
The thing is, people know what they can do on their land now. If we take land and put it into residential, that can limit the possibilities of what they are now do. And it also limits to what the neighbors can do. And it might be only one person that wants to extend out. So we'll be penalizing a couple people that don't have a chance to do anything because they don't want to do something.
Okay, so that's a no. Do I have any other, is there any other yeses? So we can, if we get majority of us that want to go to the 750 dotted line, we'll make that recommendation. Okay, I got 4, 750 dotted line. Yeah,
We interpret the order, so we'll stick with that.
okay.
It's not that I'm against the setback, it's because it goes across a couple zones and it changes the intent of what the person bought the property for.
And if, well, I think we'll have. So without getting into that debate on the pros and cons and the tax fairness, let's just go through the criteria if we could.
So the second one here, yep, the second one here, it doesn't have any, this one doesn't have any road frontage, but it does have a road right away that goes to the trap road. And again, we're just looking to extend that to the 750 line.
And just for clarification, we're talking about a very small, I mean, these questions that you have, while they're good, they're really the outliers, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the vast majority of what you looked at is pretty much clear cut?
Yep.
Okay, very good then. Is there any other, what's your recommendation then?
To extend the 750 line because it's got access into the trap road.
Because of the right-of-way, and that right-of-way was designed for potential access to the back lots or the front lot of the other property line, correct?
I believe so.
Usually with a
I
deeded
think-
right-of-way, that's.
I think it even has a house here.
Oh, yeah, that dotted line's a right-of-way, okay. So they even, so that, I wish you could you scroll up? Is there a little bit more of that map?
No, there isn't. But that's a good example where we have housing in agricultural zones where this kind of corrects that issue.
Yeah, I mean, you just have a little sliver of residential, just enough to grab that house,
Right.
so.
It probably really restricted where they could place the house, and they might have chosen a different location if they were allowed to.
Or that, actually, that house is probably, I know that house is older than ag zone, and so when they drafted them up, they just grabbed that one, in order to make it, compliant, if you would. Okay, so any thoughts on this dotted line still, or any other change? This is for when you see a right-of-way coming into a city-owned line, road. No? Any objections to maintaining the 750? None, okay.
So this one here, I guess we're taking a little bit more conservative approach. This is the back of the lot, but, rather than going out to the 750 line, we're suggesting that we stop at the roadway there because we're creating a weird sliver there. But again, a small piece is on the other side of the road. Do we go across the road or do we not go across the road, I guess is the question here.
Which road is that? Sorry. What road are we looking at that 750 line would abut?
That's the Steel Road. It's a dirt road off of Pownell.
City-owned road, correct?
It is a public
It
street.
is a public street, okay.
I wouldn't cross the road if it was up to me.
I think, I
The back
agree.
lot there, that's on the main road.
So the back lot of the main road, of Steel Road
Pownell?
itself?
No, Pownell. But yeah, stop at Steel Road.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
To the other side, that's. Okay, so consensus that we stop at the road, so the non-strip road.
If the property owner wanted to extend it on his own, couldn't he get a petition to petition the planning board to change his property if he so choose? Or whoever so choose?
That's creating a variance.
And a property owner could always request it, but I think it's either a good idea or it's not, and we're just asking for advice on where to draw that line. I think they,
And we're still giving them some wiggle room to apply their own knowledge base do some of these recommendations too.
The 750 is the black.
Yeah, the purple lines, the property lines. So I think we have consensus to stop at the road if the road is not stripped.
Yep.
Good? Okay.
So this one, this one's kind of interesting. So, 95 or so, when this was established, the widening to 750, originally some of these were at 750. This is a case where it was. So a subdivision was built on the back end of that. So now, do we take that in consideration? Now, this is a public road. Do we add the 750 in this particular case, adding additional land to those properties behind that particular road? I can't read the name of the road. Partridge Lane?
Off Pownell, okay.
Yeah. So it's really those lots behind Partridge Lane that we're looking at to, increase that depth. So now we're going from 750 and we're really adding essentially another 300 feet back of that.
Basically creeping, and theoretically, they could do that again and creep again. So-
Right.
Not in
So
favor of that.
I just wanted to,
750 from the original strip road or the back lot?
Correct.
Do I have consensus on that? Yeah? Okay, there you go. Yeah, I think that's a smart move on that one, because you don't want creep.
excellent. So I know we said roads, and there was some talk about roads, and then there was also some conversation about rural residential and low country density residential lots. So this is along Taylor Palm, and this is a 250-foot strip of land. Now, the other question is, do we look at this strip of land, do we increase that to 750? So essentially, that strip is 250. Do we want to go to 750 in the strip?
I'd like to ask for a thought on these two options. This is, I think, one of the most interesting maps, because we're literally increasing the strip from the water's edge up, when most of those lots are very, very, very small lots. I mean, they're quarter, third-acre lots. Should we be looking at this in reverse and not increasing the width of this strip, but actually allowing a strip along the major roadway in order to minimize potential runoff and allow more access to city services up there? Because a lot of those roads down there are private roads.
I'm going to put my economic community development
Yeah.
hat on just for a minute. I think about and I know that there's thoughts about, this is a TMDL lake, most at risk and things like that. But I think about economic and community development and driving that to that $55 million valuation that you're talking about for public work, for public safety. I think about lots like that have a common access to a lake, but you have a community of residential areas that are not necessarily on the lake, that drive value, that have access to the lake. It's basically a waterfront lot that's supported by, lots that are above, and they have a common access lot. In this particular case, I don't know if that's going to land and that's going to happen there, but maybe this is a potential where that kind of scenario could be created, so a person has the opportunity to have access to what's right now a private lake. It does not have public access. And this could be an opportunity for more people to access Taylor Pond. That is just one standpoint. It's not, I'm just
good
using that
standpoint.
as
No,
a
thank you.
scenario.
Thank you for
But
the
that's just something to think about.
Thoughts?
So my concern would be, as the mayor mentioned, pressure on the lake, which already has pressure on it, and access through private property to the lake, because the only public access there is that beach and Taylor Pond.
You got Everett Road, West Shore Drive.
But you know what I mean? They would be going through private property or have to figure out some way to get
it's a
to.
mess.
So I would
Street justify it, you're saying, off Garfield?
say leave it at 250. I mean, if, I'm just concerned, as I said, about pressure on the lake, and also what could happen with people saying, I've built along the road, I need access to the lake. Whose house am I going to walk through to get there if I have access? And I appreciate the economic development aspect to it, but I really think that sort of the environmental and also personal property could be a real issue here.
You've got well, this is interesting as well. I agree with Counselor Lasagna on a lot of this, and I keep getting back to, I think maybe we need to refer this out to planning board as well, but I think that to address everybody's, your comments are great, John, and Councilor Lasagna's too, is the strip needs to be on Garfield Road. You already see where the strips have been manipulated over time, the triangle in order to grab one house and make that conforming. And that gives a nice buffer of, ag/conservation land, which I think that should probably be. But also, there's a lot of land here that no one can utilize facing Garfield Road at all. And it's not ag. We don't want ag in that parcel, I would argue, because of potential phosphorus runoffs, mitigation costs, and so forth. But by allowing residences to be built along a continuation of that strip, you'll actually protect, I think, the pond more. And I'm kind of just talking based upon, my knowledge. I think the planning board needs to really dig into that hypothesis.
Well,
Everybody agree on that? for
I
them
think
to
what
look
we
at?
heard from the Lake Auburn study was that any development, even the low impact development, still has an impact on water quality, and that more forested land is better always. So I'm in favor of keeping the strip at 250 feet as is.
I think everybody, has everybody agreed on that? I think the compromise here is looking at adding the strip up on Garfield Road and not increasing the strip on the lake.
Is Garfield in the watershed for Taylor?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Garfield, jeez, yeah, Perkins Ridge Road, I'm sorry.
Right.
What happens when you drive in the city for 40 years or 30 years, I just know to go to John's house, take a left. Yes, no, so keeping the 250 along the water, this is, Taylor Pond Watershed is pretty significant. And we do have overlay and watershed protection to maintain phosphorus, minimize phosphorus runoff, but actually expanding the strip along Perkins Ridge Road, which is to the west of the lake. But again, this might be one for the planning board to look at too. There are already significant houses in that area too, so.
And also that distance from the lake, I mean, I know we're not talking about Garfield, but it's significant compared to where Garfield Road is, how close that is to the lake.
It is significantly more, yeah, right, that is Perkins Ridge, I'm sorry. Yeah, Garfield's further down. Yep, okay, so we'll.
We're talking 750 that way, away from
Could be that, or if the planning board thinks it should go on both sides, but again, off Perkins Ridge, and, is there, we don't know if there's any ag, I mean, this is,
So that purple
cleaning it
line
up.
there represents 750 from the lake,
Yeah.
so it's probably similar somewhere in
It is,
from the road.
it is almost in the middle.
it'll just be on the opposite side of the lake, that purple line, rather.
I would
You guys want to look at Perkins Ridge, or do you
Well-
just want to punt everything over to the planning board on
No.
this
So
criteria?
this one particularly, I don't think we should extend it past the 250 from the lake, and then extending it further down Perkins Ridge is a different question. It's a different order that we're looking at, entirely. So I think it's something to discuss, but I don't know if it's this. I don't think it's this.
So this, keep it clean, 250 from the lake, hold, no 750. Do we have consensus on that?
Yep.
Okay. There's, and then, again, expanding. Now, I will say, and I'll ask council for opinion, though I think we covered it really in the other criteria above. There is some really they're just odd strips off Perkins Ridge right there, that triangle that bumps out and grabs a house. I would like to see staff build some fairness and equity in some of those parcels and present that to planning board. If staff wants to do that, i.e. fix a triangle. But I think we covered that up in criteria 2 or 3.
We'll ask the planning board for feedback.
Okay.
on that.
And we got that little carve out there, which doesn't make sense. Okay.
Finally, the last scenario.
So this is Riverside Drive, on the westerly side, heading, I think that's westerly side, or easterly side, heading towards the river, on the riverside, we'll just say Riverside from Riverside Drive. That land there is ag zone and resource protection right now. And what we're looking to do there is just really update the FEMA 2014 flood insurance rate maps. But then, expand only on the other side of the road, so the westerly side, only expand the westerly side. So that's what we're recommending in this particular case. Expanding, residential areas into a floodplain, I don't think that's good planning. It's not good science, and It's just, and then it also, in addition, it increases the risk for the city and the risk management portions of, you know, insuring properties and the overall rating for the city.
I have a question. Have we looked at the prime soils map or soils of statewide importance? Since soils along riverbanks tend to be the most fertile soil you can find.
We did look at that. We did not, that's not something that we had taken in consideration, but everything along the river right now is, we're recommending that it stays protected and in resource protection.
I think it's worth considering that soil mapping for all of the different proposals that are here and asking the planning board to include that in their consideration.
So do we have consensus? Do we follow staff's recommendation and leave as is closer to the river, expand to the west side? Yes?
Leave as is.
Okay.
You gotta remember though, as you get down further past the overpass, there are some strips there that are pretty high from the river. And
Topography.
you're gonna, people that are willing to sell off some of their land and stuff there for the future, you're gonna stop it if you leave it, because of the river.
Well, that's
Not-
just on the east side of the river, not the west side. So between the road and the river itself. The highland, if I remember correctly, is on the west side of the road.
It's pretty high on both sides of the road, actually. You'll never see the river come up to the houses that are there after the overpass heading south. You'll never see that river come up there.
And the way that we're interpreting it is even the land on the riverside of Riverside Drive, any of it that is outside of the 100-year floodplain would stay residential. We just wouldn't expand it into the 100-year floodplain. Interpreted it. And that's the way that it's been done in the past in those sections.
So just to clarify, it's to not expand along this part of the river? Say
Just
that.
be consistent with the 100-year floodplain as defined by FEMA, or flood, the east side.
West side of it, towards the river, 100.
Okay, thank you.
Right. In the update with the 2014 flood insurance rate maps, we really want to just update those and get it, you know, get it to today's standards. Because I believe we're using 95 now.
The zoning boundaries are based on the 1995 flood maps. They haven't been updated to the 14. 2014.
Right after we lost the flood. Okay, so, I'm not sure, so that, we have consensus on that? Good? Okay. I think Counselor Boss's point of at least having the overlay for all these extensions with prime soils should be considered by the planning board. It's part of their purview.
That's something that the Ag Committee asked for as well.
And we have the map, I believe, it's on GIS.
Yep.
So that should be enough.
And it's for all the proposals, correct, in terms of the,
Should have it. You
Soils.
should just have the overlay in general. You know, so, and there's spots everywhere throughout the city. I think we're sitting on some pretty good ag land right here on the city hall. I know the mall is, used to be. Okay.
So
That's it. So
are we saying going all the way out through, that's even if it's ag or residential or whatever, it's not gonna be allowed for anyone to sell, build, or anything?
No, I don't think anyone said that. It's just something to take in consideration. Something for them to look at. It's just another, I think, another variable, maybe the term I'm looking for here, that they should look and consider.
Well, if you're not looking to extend the buffer line, they can't build on it now, they won't be able to build on it then.
Depending on where the ag land is.
Yeah. Still extended to the west side of the road. Can't get within, you're not gonna be able to build within a 100-year floodplain. No insurance company will take it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, and again, I think we can't stress this enough, that any other comment and options proposed by the planning board should be looked at by this body as well. Okay, so, you know, they are the subject matter experts, and we're gonna, I know they're having a public meeting on August 10th. It's great. Let them come up with some and work this issue until the issue is worked. I think this is something that needs to be decided based upon a standard versus time. So I don't think there's any time constraints from the council on getting their feedback from planning board.
I think to reiterate Councilor McLeod's point, though, feedback on what's being proposed currently.
Yes.
Just to
Right, so
clarify.
that's, yeah, so obviously this is the only piece of property that we're talking about, just so I can be clear to people who are asking me these questions. Any other considerations either are dealt with individually or may come up?
I'm sorry, what do you mean considerations?
People asking about wanting to extend their lots that are not in these different strips that we're talking about.
Oh, they want to extend their lots? Yeah, that's not part of the order and the purview
Yep,
at this
thank
point.
you.
There are other mechanisms that exist, and those should definitely be public. And if anyone asks, I think we should get out to Mr. Cousins and staff so they can convey that information on what that process is.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I disagree with you when you say there's no timeline. I'd like to make sure that this moves forward under this council, not after November 15th.
No,
or
fair enough.
whatever the date
No, fair
is.
enough. I just don't want to rush their work with 1 hour of deliberation. But yeah, so if we can give them, if everybody's in agreement, that we'll get this back before December 1st for action.
I think it'd be great to hear from staff on what they have for feedback on timeline.
I mean, it needs to be handled by this council.
Yep, we'll plan to hold a public hearing on the 10th of August. If they don't get through the whole thing, or if they table it, then we can finish up hopefully in September and be back in front of you the end of September, early October.
Good, fair enough. Okay.
Now, when the planning board gets done and make their recommendations, we're going to have a chance to discuss it before we get it on the agenda for us to vote it up and down? Because I'm afraid that it's going to be the 11th and a half hour, and we want to change something, but we're not skilled enough because we're not, at least I'm not on planning board zoning and stuff. But if I try to throw an amendment and get the votes, then I could really mess up something. I want to be able to discuss it and find out if what we want is right or wrong. And then if we have to change it, have it looked at again by the planning board.
I think basically the timeline that Eric and Phil just laid out, end of September, early October, will allow that.
And you could either workshop it after planning board, or you guys could table it if you wanted more time.
Yeah, I think we have plenty of time. And again, since you just said you weren't that skilled at that,
Yes.
definitely reach out to the rest of us here so we can get you up to speed so you don't make the wrong amendment. Okay, so we'll help you on that one. Okay, very good. We're going to move along to the next agenda item. Request to fund Conservation Commission membership dues, and the manager's going to take care of this one pretty quickly.
Yes, so, council, one thing that with, like, when we talk about planning board or even city council, you have a budget, training for planning board or, dues for associations come under the, planning department's budget. But we have other committees that they don't necessarily align like that. And so, conservation is one of those, where they're really not assigned to a department, as well as the ag committee is not assigned to a department. One thing that we want to make sure is that we're providing good resources and good training that's available for our committee members that are taking that time to be part of these committees and to serve in the best way. We can move forward with this, but what I'm recommending is that if the council's in favor of this, what we would do is in future budgets, we would work this in either under the city council's budget or the city manager's budget for those committees that don't align with a department, where there's that funding for, sometimes it's the training that takes place. I was looking at Karen, I don't know if the regulatory board, they have training that comes in under the assessings department. So there are departments that have that, and they have those allocations already worked in the budget. But we have some that don't. And so I just want to make sure the council's in agreement that we really haven't looked at this in the past. It hasn't been brought up in the past, but I think there's good value to it. We can move this under our dues. It's at $225, $225. So we can move that there. But moving forward, that's what we would do. But I want to make sure that we stay on a budget that's only focusing on like dues to associations that bring resources, that allows for access to either data or someone who is an expert in that field that can come and do a presentation to one of our boards or committees or commissions. And also, it stays towards any training that's done that's needed for these board members, but not exceeding that. You know, I think that we could get into a slippery slope. So that's why I want to just talk about these. That would be the two areas that we would focus on. Council's in agreement with that. We'll go ahead and move forward. And then in the future, those requests will come to you in the budget.
Now, is the 225 for the whole committee, or is that 225 for each member?
So the 225 is factored off from the size of our community, not regarding members. So it is a straight cost for our community, 225.
Because that's not bad, but if you had said times whatever number, then that would be considerable.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea. I'm curious as to other committees that, even if they are under a department, may say, we want to bring somebody in to speak to us or educate us about this, an application process or something. Does that seem appropriate? And to make sure that they all know that they have access to this kind of expertise.
Yeah, I think we really need to work with those that aren't under a department, because those departments really take care of that for them. But absolutely, I think that's, once we do this, we talk about it in the, we'll be working on budget here in the next few months. We'll be sure to talk to the boards. Jill didn't like that. But we'll talk to boards and committees, members. We'll make sure the staff representatives talk about this, explore what's available, and make sure we work that into a good budget. I think it's just important that we're appropriating all those funds so that you know where it's going to and that you're all in agreement.
And I think your parameters are very good.
So, and I will state for the council, for this council, we still have some action to take on reforming committees that are going to be coming up shortly in the next few weeks and months. Still a couple action points that we've yet to finish, which will help with all this going forward. The big thing was the direction from the council, this council and future councils, directly to the committees, so everybody understands what we're needing them to work on in the charter. The city council, the mayor directs the committee's work. That has to happen in the future, so we can keep control over where the expenditures are and to make sure they're actually being expended upon meeting council or future council's goals, whatever they might be.
I think the new regulatory meeting group, they had their meeting today, right, Karen, their board? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The short meeting.
So continuing trying to, make sure we're communicating with the new board, their new responsibilities. That's a whole new regulatory board that impacts several different departments. So making sure that we are making that time and making it available and educating them on what's expected. I think that's important for citizens that's serving on these boards.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Morris.
Are you evaluating, who's evaluating, the commission says this resource may be helpful. Are you evaluating the resource to determine whether?
I think we would look at what their request is. It would have to be in alignment with what their scope of responsibility. And we want to ensure that we're not duplicating potential memberships or associations that we already have.
Right.
So yes, there would be an evaluation process when the recommendation comes in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're in agreement.
Okay.
Very good. We're going to move on. Yeah, we're going to move on to the last workshop agenda item. Mr. Cousins? Oh, you're back. And great. And future land use presentations, floor is yours.
So we've been in front of the council, as well as the comp plan committee a number of times. And if you recall, we had 3 neighborhood conversation meetings at the senior center. We've talked a lot about these changes that have come, that have been recommended by the comp plan committee. We had intended to discuss the future land use map on June 22nd. We ended up moving forward with the transportation section of the comp plan at that meeting, taking that direction from the council and moving forward with the promoting food access section of the comp plan. But we stalled on the future land use map. So basically the first 6 bullet points up here. The comp plan committee has given a great deal of consideration to the potential for a new turnpike exit. And as we talked about in the transportation section, really looked at this future land use map update as a way to really let our transportation system drive growth within the city and make sure that the zoning is in place to accommodate the type of growth that was desired in certain areas. Related to the turnpike was a completely new approach, and this future land use plan accommodates that. And it's really a shift in focus from new commercial activity around a turnpike exit to a new residential opportunity around the turnpike exit, and extending from somewhere between South Main Street and Riverside Drive, with some kind of a connector road that would be yet to be designed to make the vehicle movements work, but also to create the most residential redevelopment or development opportunity from there over towards South Witham Road to Broad Street and along the entire Washington Street corridor to start to look at shifting the high-speed vehicle movements from Washington Street northbound. That's the old portion of Washington Street with a lot of existing constraints, over to the right-of-way for Washington Street southbound, which was designed to be much more like a Maine Turnpike right-of-way. It's 300 feet wide, can accommodate vehicle trips in both directions, although that needs to be looked at more closely and studied as we move in that direction. But it would really create an incredible opportunity to re-envision what is now Washington Street northbound, and really a disappointing entrance to our city. It's not something that we're proud of, something that we even avoid sometimes in bringing new people into the community. So this, I think, is a real shift in re-envisioning that corridor that could actually make a difference, whereas we really haven't been able to change that over time. Number two, as part of that, it does take into account there was an industrial transition zone planned near Broad and South Witham Road. These new recommendations move that area towards residential. The reason we really haven't seen the industrial transition take place out there is, and it has been looked at a number of times over the years, the utility costs to support true industrial land use over there just are not cost effective. There are less expensive places to create that opportunity. Consider an expanded downtown form-based code. We've done a lot of that. This plan still supports that going forward, and also to take a look at additional areas over time for what opportunities that creates for that concept of growing from the inside of the city outward. I think we made some great strides in that with the creation of the form-based code and then the expansion of it. There's still room for more of that over time. The number of proposed zoning districts is reduced substantially, especially on the residential side. And also you'll see that there's a recommendation to potentially merge the general business and general business 2 zoning districts, because there's only a few distinctions. One of them you've talked about recently with the automobile dealerships. The also make some updates to downtown zoning, including form-based code, some recommendations, and really a mixed use. One of the most significant recommendations is a brand new form-based code district that is somewhat highway oriented, like the Washington Street corridor, but really starts to build out the infrastructure to make that a successful mixed use neighborhood with improved sidewalks, lower vehicle speeds, if we can move that traffic to the Washington Street southbound right-of-way. Any questions on those aspects of it? I didn't plan a real detailed presentation tonight because I think you've seen this since the packets on the 22nd of June.
Let me clarify a little bit too on this. One of the reasons we tabled this from being on the agenda and going to planning board back in June was in light of the Lake Auburn water study and some of the potentials. We wanted to make sure we were in alignment. One thing that we have is the watershed overlay for Lake Auburn, which is really where a lot of those changes and recommendations that are going to be made by the study, if any, will be debated and put into. So it doesn't slow this down, okay? So we always have the overlay. So we made a very quick determination, Councilor McLeod, myself, and planning board member Staples, just to move it right through. Let the planning board start working on this. Okay? So hence, that's why I just want to refresh our memories why the delay happened. Any other questions? This will appear on tonight's consent agenda to be moved over to planning board for their work. Councilor Boss.
So one of the recommendations from the lake study was saying that they did not recommend any growth from the historic cores north of the lake. Is that being passed on specifically to planning board as part of our recommendation, or?
It wasn't no growth. It was the steady as is, I believe, and I could be wrong, but it wasn't no. And that will be, that's addressed, not per se with the Lake Auburn study, but we do talk about some of the historic villages, i.e. in East Auburn, okay, within this document. That has to go to planning board. We'll come back, and if we need to make any amendments or adjustments based upon the Lake Auburn water study, we can do it.
So the planning board is not being given kind of like the high-level bullet point outcomes from the Lake Auburn study to then integrate into their review of this chapter? You're saying it's kind of happening
They
on
very well
parallel
might.
tracks?
They were very well might, depending on when we get the Lake Auburn water study back.
The final, yeah.
Yeah, it's either they're gonna look at it or we're gonna look at it. Either way, we still have final approval on that.
What's the timeline for that final report?
So I would anticipate this being just a workshop item at the August planning board meeting. No action, but they can get familiar with the draft. And then we should receive the Lake Auburn study shortly after that. That'll come back to council hopefully the latter half of August, and will be available for them when they go to their September meeting for a public hearing at the planning board.
Just to clarify, what would be the process to make sure that they do look at the study as part of the redlining before it comes back to us? Is there any?
That's the plan. The council made that clear on the 22nd that they wanted that to be part of the process. So we just see it as an opportunity that the board can get familiar with what the draft is at the August meeting and not take any action until September when that full report is open. And you also may have more direction for what you want them to look at based on that later August meeting.
It's definitely a moving target. We're changing tires in a car that's going down the road. Ideally, initially, we're gonna have this study back in May, I believe, but there were some delays on getting information from third parties that prevented the timeliness of that completion. So,
And I do have to say, the changes that you've made in the land use plan, future land use map, really great job in responding to a lot of input from people and questions, and so I appreciate how the process moved forward.
Thank you.
it was not without blood and tears, mostly Tim's blood, my tears. Okay, are there any other questions? If not, we'll move it along tonight on the agenda.
Thank you.
With that, thank you very much, and I think that concludes our workshop. We'll take a 10-minute break, meet back in the council chambers, and commence our regular business then. Thank you very much. I'll now call to order this meeting of August 2nd, 2021. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we have 10 consent items on the agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Counselor,
I would like to take one item out of the consent agenda.
what would that one be?
Order 78-08022021, about the business license fee waiver, and put it into new business.
Very good. I'll remove that order out of consent item. That's order 78-08022021. I'll move that over to new business as the first item to be taken up.
Mr.
Do I have
Mayor,
a motion? Counselor?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like number 10, order 86-08022021. Initiate a formal request to send the proposed amendments to the future land use chapter to the planning board for a public hearing and recommendations at their September 2021 meeting.
Very good. I'll remove order 86-08022021. Moving that to new business, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion by Counselor McLeod, second from Counselor Lasagna. Show of hands, all those in favor? Amended consent agenda passes by a vote of 7-0. Next are the minutes of the July 19th, 2021 regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? None being, I'll entertain a motion at this time to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Counselor Boss makes a motion, seconded by Counselor Walker. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Moving on to communications, presentations, and recognition. First, Auburn Community Concert Band. We got an update. Mr. Milt Simon, you're going to come up here and give us a 40-year encapsulation of the entire Army Community Band. We want a list of every single concert you've done. Attendance, songs performed.
Really?
We got plenty of time.
Actually, I didn't know what I was walking into, so I don't trust myself to ad lib at my age anymore, so I actually wrote out some notes. And rather than sum up the last 40 years, I'd like to start by mentioning the most significant event in the band's 40-year history, which was actually a non-event. It occurred last summer when, for the first time in almost 4 decades, the Auburn Community Concert Band was unable to present a schedule of free weekly concerts in downtown Auburn. This, of course, was thanks to the pandemic. 2020 was still recorded as the band's 39th season, as we did have 10 weeks of rehearsals, which occurred starting in early January and lasted through the middle of March. What followed next was a 14-month hiatus. For me, personally, this meant that for the first time in 39 years, I had nothing to do and nowhere to go on Wednesday evenings. Band rehearsals resumed on May 5th of this year. 34 out of our previous 50 band members returned. A few members stayed away because of the pandemic, but there were others who had passed away, moved away, or had simply moved on with their lives and no longer had an interest in performing. The biggest challenge our group faced back in May was, instead of having some 23 weeks over the winter and spring to prepare for a 10-week summer concert season, we now had just 8 weeks to prepare for this summer's weekly performances. Our first concert this summer took place on July 7th. That week, and for the 2 weeks following, Mother Nature was not our friend. Rain, or the threat of rain, significantly affected the audience size to which we had previously become accustomed. Instead of 300 people, we had approximately 225 people at the first concert. We had just over 100 people at the second concert and approximately 200 people at the third concert. Fortunately, with no threat of rain this past Wednesday, some 275 people were in attendance. And considering that good weather is again predicted for this week, I am feeling optimistic that Festival Plaza will once again be bursting with people for this Wednesday's 7 p.m. performance. Speaking of Festival Plaza, our organization is very excited about the renovations now being planned by your city. Specifically, we are excited that a true performance area is now being considered for the plaza, something which was obviously overlooked the first time around. For those of you who may not know this, it was a member of the Auburn Community Concert Band who researched and then tracked down the panels which are currently in place at the plaza. It was Sid Hazelton who engineered the posts that hold the panels, and it was Mechanic Savings Bank who donated a large portion of the funds used to construct the present bandstand. What often leaves me feeling frustrated is when, after hearing our group perform indoors, people will say to me that the band sounded totally different and how much better the band sounded because we were indoors. My hope and desire is for people coming to Festival Plaza each summer to one day hear how good our band truly sounds. For this to happen, an actual performance stage is needed, a structure with acoustics in mind for the purpose of reflecting and projecting sound. In my opinion, the city should consider a stage with a raised floor, a solid and perhaps curved wall behind the stage, and an angled roof extending beyond the stage. With this in mind, I wish to express my appreciation to this council for inviting my input during this process. Lastly, I would like to conclude with some thoughts which I have also been sharing with our audiences at every concert. The ongoing success of the Auburn Community Concert Band is largely due to the unique partnership that our organization has had with the City of Auburn for 40 consecutive years. No matter the changes within the city's leadership team these past 4 decades, whether it be the mayor, the city manager, the head of the recreation, public works, and electrical departments, everyone has always treated me like a VIP, which I have truly appreciated. I could not feel any prouder of the relationship between your city and the Auburn Community Concert Band, and I sincerely want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to state this officially and for the record. Thank you.
That's the most efficient communication I think we've seen here in months. That's Milt. Thank you very much on that. And it just, before you leave, I made some notes here too. And first of all, we invited you here, Milt, this evening to hear about really the community band, what you're doing. 40 years is great, but we also have another reason as well. Our community is filled with truly exceptional people, and each year Auburn joins more than 100 Maine municipalities in presenting the Spirit of America tribute by recognizing outstanding community volunteers. Maine's first Spirit of America Foundation tribute was presented in 1991, and Auburn joined the program in 2018, just a couple short years ago. Milt, we're really glad you're here. For 40 years, you've been the leader and the driving force behind the Auburn Community Concert Band, and every summer, the band presents weekly concerts in downtown Auburn, performs at local nursing homes, presents special holiday concerts in the wintertime, and much, much more. You first organized the band in the fall of 1981, and to this day, ACCB is one of the largest community bands in Maine, often drawing 300 to 400 people to each performance. The band appeals to audiences of all ages and draws the people of Auburn together in a way that music really only can. And so for your vision, Milt, and your dedication and your love of this community, it's my honor to present to you our 2021 Spirit of America tribute. I don't want to touch its glass. You did a great job. Keep it up. 40 more years, Mel.
took a few, but let's do.
Up here?
Oh, buddy.
You want to get up in front or behind the podium?
Oh, you guys can stand behind.
Yep, no, come back here. That'd be great. Council?
Said he wanted the VIP experience. Yeah,
No, right there.
Bill, hand him in.
right down in the middle, sir.
Yeah,
No, right here in the thing.
I took.
Yeah, well, I tell you, Sabrina, we might get one that's halfway decent. So, Milt, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in.
all right. Put it on the screen. so
Ah,
I can see it.
oh, we're on a roll, though. We got one more surprise here to present. So, we got a lot of Spirit of America nominees, and real quickly, I just want to mention some of them, just so we all know that there's a lot of volunteers, great people in this community that are giving a lot. First of all, the Bells of St. Louis Committee, Central Maine Conditioning Clinic, the Bell Tower Project Committee in itself, Jimbo Marston, Uncle Andy's Digest and the Summer Block Party, the City of Auburn Grab and Go Grocery Program, it'll be a second year in a row, they were nominated, Dave Griswold, Community Forestry Board, Auburn Community Concert Band, of course, we just had Milton here, James Whitmore, great volunteer, especially with Make-A-Wish around the community, Hamilton Industries, and then Auburn's Age-Friendly Community Committee. So we truly had a lot of other nominees, so many, and the vote was very, very close. We actually decided to give out a second award. So one of the Spirit of America nominees received for our next recipient reads, this individual has dedicated himself to the city of Auburn, and more specifically to New Auburn. For too many years to count, he has an impeccable record of helping any and all city causes. We couldn't agree more. His tireless in his efforts to see the bells of St. Louis Church displayed in the beautiful clock tower and stands today in Anniversary Park. He's helped Auburn become an age-friendly community, working to establish age-friendly programs, not to mention a beautiful facility in Pettingill Park. Anyone who knows him knows that he thinks of the people of Auburn above all else. Not only did he serve the city for more than 30 years as an employee, he has also put in nearly 10 years as our Ward 5 counselor. He serves in committees, partners with the Police Department and New Auburn Neighborhood Watch, and so much more. One of the nominations we received said it all. Leroy Walker truly loves our city and its people. So for that reason and many more, it's my honor and our honor to present Councilor Leroy Walker with the 2021 Co-Spirit of America Award. Everybody, let's put another. You're very welcome. Yeah, there you go. I never get fucked up, man. 50 pictures. Thank you. Congratulations, Leroy. Great job. You deserve it.
Parking? Like, you fit straight now? I really thought you were gonna.
Liz texted me and said you forgot it.
Huh?
Liz texted me and said you forgot it.
You know, it is what it is. Okay, so we're going to move all along. That is our Spirit of America presentation, folks. Now we're going to move on to Karen Scammon and Joe St. Peter. We're going to talk about equally exciting business and happy taxes.
This is hard to follow.
That's hard to follow, I know. We'll try to make some jokes, keep it lively, you know.
This is
I
even.
too am just like Mr. Chairman.
We're not giving you a standing O.
Probably. I don't know, actually, we might. We might today.
Depends what the number is.
Yep, we might.
You want me to?
Yeah, please.
On the taxes.
Maybe I can jump in just to start.
Sure.
So Mayor, Council, the community, really thankful for the work that Karen and their team did for our tax commitment this year. Just so folks know, we were down one person in that office. There's 3 people that make up the assessing department. And so it was really down to Karen and Joe to do all the heavy lifting. So I just want to thank them for the work that they did, stayed on task, and was able to really do a great job for our community. There's a few headlines that I'm hoping comes out of tonight's meeting, and I think one of them is just regarding our increase in valuation growth for our real estate evaluation, just what a great job from the community council, encouraging that business growth, putting systems in place to make sure that that can happen, reducing any regulatory issues that allow for our developers to come here and want to be part of Auburn. As we had talked about this in the budget process, that you'll see the benefit of that in the future, and you're starting to see that now. And based on the work that Karen was able to do, you'll see that. So I think that's our first. I won't give away the numbers. I'll let Karen do that. But just a great job by her and her team, and I think you'll appreciate this report. Go ahead, Karen.
That was very nice, thank you. Good evening. Like City Manager said, we are here just to give you some information about the commitment, so we'll start right away. We officially committed taxes last Monday, or this past Monday. And I have to say, number one, kudos to Kelsey, who is our tax collector and deputy finance director. It was her first commitment process, and with a little coaching from Jill Cunningham, she was amazing. She did absolutely fabulous, so kudos to Kelsey. Let's start with, oh, I skipped the first one, didn't I? Went right by it. Okay. As we've discussed before, April 1st is our official date for the valuations to be fixed. By state statute, all taxable property, real and personal, in the city must be fixed by April 1st. Our commitment date, like I just said, was Monday, this past Monday the 26th, and our abatement deadline, which is also set by state statute, 185 days from the date of commitment. That's going to be January. So January 27th is our abatement deadline. I do want to make a point to say that Joe has made up all of this information on something, it will be posted on the website tomorrow. So everything will be there. The commitment date, the abatement deadline, our mill rate will be on there, and pertinent information that everybody calls and asks about and everybody wants to know about. It'll all be posted by tomorrow. So let's talk, we talked earlier on this year about the state certified ratio, and we alluded to the fact that because our sales ratio is not at 100%, we would be adjusting the certified ratio, which we did. We certified at 93%. So let me explain that a little bit. Every year, and I'm sure I mentioned this when Joe and I did our presentation earlier, every year the Maine Revenue Service does a sales ratio study based on all of the sales that occur in the city. They are 2 years behind, so when we got our official certified ratio that the Maine Revenue Service certified, it's based on 2019 sales. At that time, the state said that the overall ratio for the city was 88%. We have certain parameters. The assessor then has the discretion to choose a ratio within certain parameters based on what the state has said our citywide ratio is. So Joe and I discussed at length, we looked at sales trends that have happened over the past few years, where we think that they're going to go. A lot of it goes into it. What's the impact when we reduce the ratio? How's it going to impact the taxpayer if we reduced it to 98% or 92%? So we ran all of those numbers. It was quite a process, and it's quite a decision to make, but we finally settled on 93%. So what that means is our exemptions have to be reduced to 93% of full value, and there is a slide on this that we'll get to. Our personal property business assets, because they are reported at cost, have to be reduced to 93% ratio, and our tree growth price per acre, because that is given to us each year by the state, and that's 100%.
So we reduced that as well to 93%. Yep. Oh, the mill rate, I'm sorry. And the mill rate, yay, we were very proud of this, increased 7 cents. We thought that was very reasonable. As you know, the mill rate is a product of valuation and the budget. And we held it to 7 cents because of what our valuation that came in, that I'm very excited to tell you about.
Karen, if I could just remind the council, so when you approved the budget at the end of June, you approved that budget based off from dollar numbers, not the mill rate. And so those dollar numbers then get calculated into the new figures that Garen just provided based on the tax amendment. You have an updated sheet that I handed to you that provides you with that information. As you recall, when you approved the budget, it was a 19 cents, based on the numbers that we had used from last year, it was 19 cents for an increase on the mill rate. And as Karen just said, it's now at 7% based off from many items that she'll talk about on how that goes into determining that number. Thanks, Karen.
Okay, so this is how the 93% ratio has affected the homestead and veterans exemptions. The 100% homestead, you probably are aware, is $25,000. So it has been reduced to $23,250, which there's the tax savings on that. Veterans as well, we had to reduce from $6,000 down to this $5,580, and those are the tax savings for anyone who has a veterans exemption. These are our valuation comparisons. 2020, real estate only. This does not take into consideration personal property. That will be the next slide. So this is real estate only. We have side by side the first number that you're looking at, real estate valuation, the $2 billion. That does not take into consideration any exemptions. That's straight up valuation. The exemptions, you can see where 2021, our real estate exemption number value has dropped. That's due to that 93% ratio and the adjustment that we made for those exemptions. So our total taxable value, however, increased substantially. It's over $30 million. That's real estate only. So that's a substantial increase that we were very proud of. And again, as the city manager said, it's due to getting businesses in here, it's being able to come here, making profitable business, and we're seeing it continue, obviously, as you are, I'm sure, and we're hoping that next year's even better, because we have a lot of projects in the wings, and we're hoping we see that number go up. So personal property, as I mentioned, we had to ratio to 93%. So in this case, our 2021 personal property valuation decreased. The Betty exemption decreased, also a 93% ratio. So our overall personal property decreased. When you take that into consideration with the real estate, our net increase in valuation was $17 million, which is still a good increase in valuation. This just shows you taxpayer impact. I chose a $200,000 property. That's just random, but it's a pretty average home price. Well, starter home now. It shows the difference between 2020 and 2021 based on the new mill rate, based on the fact that we've ratioed to 93%, and the tax difference, what the taxes would be last year, what they are this year, just so you can get a feel for the difference in the taxes. So the increase in taxes on the home with a homestead, this is with a homestead, your increased taxes are almost $54 based on the new mill rate. And that's that. That's a lot of numbers, I know, I get it, but that will all be, we will put together our statistic book again once we finish the municipal valuation return like we did last year, and we will be handing that out to all of you. all of these all of these numbers will be in it, the whole MVR will be in it, so there'll be a lot of valuable information when we get that booklet put together for you.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
One more additional thing to look at on that sheet that I provided you. You'll see that this includes multiple years of the council-adopted budget. But the one to take a look at is that when you came into office as new councilors for this term, the mill rate was at $23.92. And so the mill rate now would be mill rate would be $23.92. And then where we are now, based on the changes from the assessor's office, is $23.82. So in your 2-year term, the mill rate is reduced by 10 cents for the taxpayer. So just want to make sure I highlight that. Sometimes we can be thinking about where we were, what we had approved when we did this process of, for the budget process, that we're going to be up 19 cents, but to be able to see the 7-cent increase is great news.
And if I could add, I talked to the city manager a lot about this, obviously. I think it's a primary talking point for the last 2 years, year during all of our meetings. And a couple points, if I could just divide it out a little bit more for the people at home. When you look at what the increase in taxes are, if you would say, like everything else, our taxes would go up by the rate of inflation, which is, I believe, around 2.1% for last year, roughly. And if our budget and our taxes went up proportionally, we would have been looking at over a 50-cent increase in our mill rate. So through growth, development, and adding value, we brought that down to 7 cents. That proves that we can grow and pay for things through new valuation versus going back so much to the trough or the well, so to speak, and taking more from people who have consistently given more. What does bother me, and I do have some questions, and it doesn't bother me today. I think today is a day for celebration, frankly, on all the good work that's happened to have that net decrease. But looking to the future, we all need to be concerned with our certification level at 96%, especially based upon data that's 2 years old. As we've been following the market, I think we all know that real estate values and comparables and comparisons in MLS have gone up drastically in just the last 12 months. I believe it was 25% increase in the month of June of this year alone. So we are seeing that pretty significant raise in sales data compared with our assessed value. Karen, could you tell us what are some options for us to get back at 100%? Because that's where the bulk of this, albeit small, tax increase is coming from, us going backwards in our certification and then losing proportionally homestead and veteran exemptions and Betty reimbursement. We don't want to go further down that road, so to speak.
Well, I know nobody wants to hear the word revaluation. That obviously is the number one way to bring your certification back up to 100% of value. And that's given if the market stays the way it is, if it doesn't drop, if things hold basically the way they are, and we will stay where we are or drop, as Mayor Levesque alluded to. We may drop lower in our certified ratio if sale prices continue to climb or even level off the way they are. So obviously, a citywide, and that would be commercial and residential, revaluation would bring the numbers back up. It's possible it wouldn't bring it to 100% because it would take a couple of years at least to complete the revaluation. And who knows what's going to happen in a couple of years. So if we could strive to be at 100%, we may not make it by the end of the revaluation. Maybe we'll be at 98%, but that's the number one way to bring us back up to 100%. At this point, where our ratio and our state certified ratio is where it is, it's not feasible to do separate sections of the city and say, okay, we're going to bring you to 100% and you to 100% and you, because it would take years to work our way around all of the different properties in the city, and that would create inequity among different classes of properties. So in answer to your question, that was a long answer, but in answer to your question, if you wanted to bring values or ratios back up to 100%, I would think there would be a revaluation in the future, in the near future.
Karen, to follow up on that too, so that's an option, the best option, optimal option from your vantage point, and or gain 100% certification.
And you agree with that, I assume?
Are there any other options that are more short-term? We don't want to create any more inequities or inequalities between classes of taxpayer. Do we have any inequities or right now between classes of taxpayer that can be remedied through appropriate policy changes?
Yes, we can do what we call equalization, but when we do that, we're only bringing those properties that we're equalizing up to that 93% ratio. Nobody is going to 100%. We have some right now that are below that 93% that we are watching very carefully. We have some that we've already determined will be brought up for the next tax year to the 93%. So yes, we can do that, and that is within standards to do that for different classes of properties.
Different classes, so.
Yep.
I just want to, and this is primarily for everybody that's watching or that will watch this at a later point. When we're talking about reassessments, and that's been in the news a lot lately with Portland and South Portland, and even Lewiston talking about it, and Turner just going through with it. We've been following this closely, of course, but it doesn't necessarily mean when the value of your home goes up, that your taxes go up.
Correct.
Because
That's
as long as we control the budget, if the value goes up, the mill rate goes down, which normalizes people's contributions.
Correct.
And makes it fair. That's the ideal kind of parameters of our tax code.
You're absolutely right. The last revaluation that we did in the city, that's exactly what happened. The majority of people, because there was such a large increase in the valuations, the mill rate dropped, and the majority of the people saw decreases in their tax bills. You have that certain group that's going to see a slight increase, but you're right, most of the time, most of the taxpayers see their taxes go down, residential, or, well, and then it could be a shift in commercial could also go down.
So a timely topic on this was what happened when we had our residential strips, which are pretty much an anomaly, I believe, within the state of Maine. I don't believe many municipalities have a residential agricultural strip zone. Based upon your knowledge, is this a common thing or an uncommon?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a date and time where it was 750 feet, and then it decreased to its current 450 feet. Did those individuals that had the residential portion of their property, on average, see a decrease in their taxes? No change?
Well, as far as we can figure, and I talked to Eric about this, that change occurred back in the 90s, maybe mid-90s, late 90s. So in order to answer your question, I would have to do some extensive research and determine, okay, when did this happen? What was the mill rate back then? Were there any splits and merges since that happened? So I probably could give you an answer, but you have to give me a little time to do research on it.
And that's perfectly fine, rather get the right answer. But in general, if you take land and through zoning practices, make it unusable or limit the scope in which it can be used, does that normally drop the valuation of that land? And hence, applying the same mill rate, does that lower the dollars spent on a per acre basis?
I mean, generally speaking, you don't destroy value in that fashion, which is typically, if you had a landowner who had a buildable house lot, it would be very rare for you to take away that right, you know, as a matter of policy. It could happen. It would lower the value if you did, obviously. But, you know, we would have to look at the circumstances of the time. And like Karen said, a lot has changed since that time. Were the parcels in the same configuration? What was the overwhelming land use at that time? You know, it may or may not be apples to apples in comparison.
And I think that's something that we'd like to follow up with, Mr. Manager, because that happened when we took a buildable lot and made it unbuildable.
Right.
At least in a certain section. So I think that would be some further investigation that we could probably look at in the history of that.
Yeah, I can certainly talk with Karen. I'd like to know just what that lift would be. So that'll be important to them.
Well, thank you for answering some of those questions. Let me just, at least my portion here, we want to look at this, digest it. We might have some more questions. Taxes are complicated, but at the end of the day, more value dropped what the mill rate would have been, what we voted on and improved significantly. So if we can control and not slip down that slope on certification and keep building value, we're going to have further good years. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Karen, I've got some questions. Okay, I need a little refresher course on taxes. Now, home values, the building itself is the same no matter what zone it's in, right? Based on size?
Home value is home value, yes.
Right.
Land value is different.
But then each zone, like country residential, rural residential, business zones, ag zones, they're at a different tax rate, right?
We base our land values, you know this, on sales. And so it's more of the location of the land and taking into consideration the zoning, that's true. But just because it's low-density country residential or rural residential, that's not going to set the land value. They could be exactly the same if they are in comparable neighborhoods where our sales have shown us that those two land values are the same. So you can't just base it on this zone or that zone.
Thank you. You answered the question I was thinking.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Did you have your hand up? I'm sorry, Tim.
So I just had one quick question. What happens if what happens if the pendulum swings the other way? Home prices continue to rise, and we have a 2-year lag. We do a city reevaluation next year. It takes 2 years. And does that build-in buffer above the 100% and we just stay there? Or what happens if we go too far to the other side?
You know, actually, towns can certify over 100%. It's very rare. I'm not even sure I've ever heard of it before, but it's in the law that you can do that. Again, we would have to have a huge discussion on how's that going to affect everybody and the taxpayer, and does it make sense to do that?
Right.
So in answer to your question, I don't know what would happen. We could bring it up to 100%, and we could even certify over 100% if it was feasible.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. This is the last
Okay,
time.
I'm making sure.
Promise.
I'm not going
Promise, I can't see anything. You're good. Okay, let's go back on the agenda. Thank you very much for that communication. Actually, we're going to go on to council communication. Is there any council communication to the council or to the public at this time? Starting on the left, Councilor Lasagna.
Just quickly, tomorrow at 6 o'clock is the EL High School Building Committee meeting by Zoom, and you can find the information on the website. Things are going along as they should be.
Any Councilor Walker?
Tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the Senior Community Center, we're showing a movie, so all seniors are welcome to come down and watch it with us, 10 a.m. to 12 o'clock tomorrow.
Very good. Councilor Carey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow night is National Night Out, starting at 5:30 over here in Festival Plaza and out on Main Street. It's a great event to bring your family and your kids. There's usually a lot of things to do, and they give out hot dogs and popcorn, and usually popcorn, and bottled water or lemonade. So come on down, bring your family, bring your neighbor's kids with your neighbor, and come and have some fun.
Any other communication? Okay, a couple things. August 21st of this year, August 21st, the Maine Bicentennial Parade, brought to you by Poland Spring, will be held in Auburn and Lewiston. We have magnets. Please get this out. We're thinking that we're going to have anywhere from 20 to 40,000 people in this parade. We have 100 units, including Air National Guard flyovers along the river, things that have never been in a parade in Maine's history are happening. Over 100 units. Pretty exciting time. It's also going to be live telecast on WGME, their Fox affiliate, covering around 3/4 of the state, plus live on social media. The governor will be in attendance as our Grand Marshal. She'll be riding along, I think, the world's largest 3D printed boat. The Dirigo made it at UMaine, so that's going to be pretty exciting. Then we're going to drop her and the Dirigo in the river. We're going to see if it floats. I'm joking. We can't do that. They shot that one down. But it's going to be a great parade, so please, everybody show up, and let's make sure we communicate this out to the area. Traffic will be interesting that day, so get down there early and enjoy. Next up, we have a lot of other events, but I'm going to touch upon two more big ones to put on your calendar. September 25th, we're having the second annual Auburn Blues and Brew Festival. This year at Anniversary Park, they have an amazing amount of bands participating. It will be a multi-hour event, so please show up. It's a Dempsey Challenge weekend as well, so just like we did the last time we had this in 2019, we have a lot of people from away, so really, really great environment. If you haven't heard, the acoustics down at Anniversary Park, they're fabulous. Absolutely, the built-in amphitheater is great. And then New Year's Eve Auburn, it's going to be December 31st until about 10:30 or 11 o'clock with fireworks. We do have a band. It's going to be Hello Newman will be the headliner, and we're going to get some other acts to open for them. It's going to be a great time. It was a couple years ago. We're looking forward to having it back. So 3 big events, putting Auburn back on the map as a city of events. So it's happening. I'll turn over to the manager for some other communication. And that's it. We're going to move along. I'm going to open up the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. Just please step up to the podium there. And if you could limit your comments to around 3 minutes, state your name and address, and we'll go from there. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Please.
Good evening there. My name's Lance Pearson, and I own some property in Auburn. Is there a way that anybody could pull up one of the last examples from the workshop? I only found out about this in the agenda over there today, so I'm not fully prepared, but my property is actually on one of those, the Perkins Ridge Road example.
Pass it. Sorry. Oh, that's okay. No, that's fine. It's topical. Next. Down. I think that's a criterion.
So I'll try to talk louder, but if we want to go over, I actually, just a little bit.
I don't think they can. Oh, there we go.
Well, I mean,
Zoom out. Bigger.
There we go.
Thank you.
a little more. This I own 24 acres here. This 24 acres down here, about 6 of it or so is a field. This is all heavily wooded. There's over 900 feet on Perkins Ridge Road. So when you were talking earlier, like if you look, I do have a little bit of the LDCR here on that, all the setbacks. I couldn't build it, but I wanted to build it. When you talked about the 750, which is the purple line of continuation, and if that happened, yeah, I could build there, but I actually agree with what the council said, and I think that should. The other things I heard about this continuing on here, I think something like that makes sense. Again, here I have this land, it's all agricultural, most of it's all wooded, but if I develop it in an agricultural sense, whether if I have livestock there, even fields, possibly the phosphates and nitrates would affect the watershed. I don't know if that's what everybody would want, number one, but I guess I would hope that this could be extended, and when we look at this, this strange offshoot here, trapezoid here, this is my property line right here. There's houses here, there, this one falls on that house. So again, to me, it makes sense, and this is what I hope to see and work towards in the future with a comprehensive plan. I'm just here voicing my opinion, not sure where it goes after this, but I don't agree with that. Like the bill that it was. But I do think that we would, some of the members of the subdivision should consider. It's all agricultural. This, even up here, this is all heavily wooded. To be able to do something agricultural there. Forestry is considered agricultural and all, but that's probably not enough to be able to build on the 30% average. all that down. Do I want to take down all those trees? No. I want to keep the beauty of the land. But again, that's really all that I wanted to bring up. I hope that we address in the future. And I think for various reasons, it makes sense from multiple sides where it's not really feasible as agricultural land. And also, again, for, to be able to do something with the property for me.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in for the first time to speak to us. We probably recommend that you speak at the August 10th Planning Board public hearing, which will be here. I believe you probably got a letter as an abutter or close to notification. That way, as you're getting your views across as the process is moving.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
But no, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I thank you for your time.
No, thank you. Anybody else in the public that would like to speak during tonight's open session?
Mr. Mayor, can you please ask him if he actually did get a letter?
Mr. Pierce, did you?
June 21st?
No, the August 10th meeting.
I haven't, but so the people who I bought it from, they're on the deed as well as me, so maybe they got the letter? Would that make sense?
You might be outside 500 feet as not a close abutter per se to the residential chain. Well, Mr. Cousins, if you could just get him some information on that.
And I've spoken with Mr. Cousins.
Okay, great. We'll make sure you get the information. In that, from a communication standpoint, we want to make sure that we post that letter, if we could, out to the website and make sure everybody in Auburn knows, because it does affect a lot of other folks that might not be a direct abutter. Okay, thank you, Councilor Gary, for bringing that up. Thank you, sir. Anybody else in the public? No? I'd like to close the first open session of the night. Going to go into unfinished business. First, ordinance 32-07192021, amending the zoning of the property located at 41 Stevens Mills Road from suburban residential to general business 2. This is a second reading. Do I have a motion?
So motion. Second.
Yeah, okay, we're going to go Councilor Carrier, thank you, and then a second by Councilor McLeod. Open this up to the public for comment. Any comment? And then I'll bring it back to the council. Council, anybody in opposition to this second reading order? Anybody in support?
I'm in support of it. Just as part of the future land use that we are putting forward, it is included in the comprehensive plan to be rezoned in that direction as well.
Very good then. I'm going to ask at this point for a roll call vote.
Councilor Milks,
Yes.
Councilor Carrier,
Yes.
Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Councilor Boss,
Yes.
Councilor Gary,
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna,
Yes.
and Councilor McLeod.
Yes.
Order passes second reading by a vote of 7-0. Next is ordinance 33-07192021, amending Chapter 60, Article 12, Division 5, Section 60-992B of the Auburn Court of Ordinances and Shoreland Zoning map to allow as a special condition overlay in identified areas of the shoreland zone the height of all principal or accessory structures to exceed the 35-foot height limit to maximum of 50 feet. This is the second reading. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Councilor Mills, second by Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to the public for comment. Anybody would like to comment on this second reading? No? I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any opposition to this?
No, just a question. How many stories is this? We're going from, can we talk about it that way?
We can and we would. It's roughly 4,
Going to 4 stories.
going to 4.
Okay, thank
Allowing
you.
4 up to 4. So at a roughly 12-foot average per story with construction in there. Any opposition? Any support? None being asked for a roll call vote?
Councilor Milks,
Yes.
Councilor Carrier,
Yes.
Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Councilor Boss,
Yes.
Councilor Gary,
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna,
Yes.
and Councilor McLeod.
Yes.
Order passes, vote of 7-0. Move on to new business here. Bear with me just one second. We're going to bring those consent items back into the new business agenda in order. We're going to start off with, first is order 78-08022021, authorizing the city clerk to waive the $100 business license fee for St. Dominic Academy's annual holiday festival. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor McLeod and a second from Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to Councilor McLeod first, as he wanted it off the consent item agenda.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up that as soon as possible, if we could probably get our fees and permits taken care of and voted on. This is one of the areas that Councilor Boss and I worked really hard on to eliminate from our day-to-day stuff and make it, I believe we eliminated this one entirely, so it wouldn't actually have to come to us, it just wouldn't be required. So just wanted to make sure that we're moving in that direction.
Very good. Any other comments? Opposition, support? None being. Ask for a vote by a show of hands. Thank you, Mr. Councilor McLeod. All those in favor of waiving the $100 fee? Opposed? None being. Fee is waived. Next on the agenda is, again, from the consent agenda, is Order 86-080-22021, initiating a formal request to send the proposed amendments to the future land use chapter to the planning board for a public hearing and recommendation at their September 2021 meeting. Councilor, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilor McLeod, second Councilor Carrier. Bringing it up to Councilor Gary, who pulled this up the consent item to speak either for or against.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support their changes in the setback as long as it's a full zone. I do not support strip zoning and most of all the changes we have discussed this evening. The other thing I do not support, as much as I understand and I want to see the city grow and I want to see our homes increase, but I don't support some of the proposed increased units per some of the zones. So I wanted to be on that record of not supporting as big of a growth as been projected in some of our more protected and less populated areas.
I'm sorry, what was the projected growth patterns?
Yes.
Do we have a projected number that you were
When you were talking, when we had the public meetings, you were talking about how many house units were going to be per certain types of zone, like rural residential, country residential. And I heard from a few constituents that they thought the numbers were very high. So if it's in this, I do not support the number to the extent that was proposed, and I haven't seen any reductions.
So you're talking about the density allowed per acre versus the number in the zone? I just want to clarify. Okay, so you're talking about the density. Got it. Very good. Any other comments in opposition to this or in support? None being, I'm going to ask for a vote.
May I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Can we get a roll call vote, Mrs. Eastman?
Counselor Milks,
Yes?
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
No.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Order passes by a vote of 6-1. Just 1 second, please. Okay. Next on new business is Order 87-08022-021, which is approving the formation of a new department, Capital Infrastructure and Purchasing. Excuse me, a new department, which will be called Capital Infrastructure and Purchasing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Councilor McLeod, second Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public for comment. Is there any members of the public that want to comment? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Mr. Manager, this is your order. Would you like to lead off with just a brief description, or?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, Council. As you saw in the information sheet, according to city charter, the council is the entity that would establish any departments that aren't already authorized within the charter or assigned to another department. The current structure of the Public Works includes the engineering department, and under this new department, we would move the purchasing function out from under the financing department over into this new department, as the purchasing function really is about creating bids, doing capital investment projects, and that would align with this new department of the capital infrastructure. I've listed out the goals and for this new department, but it will be to accommodate the public needs and activities and goals that the city and the council establish, based on capital infrastructure. There's also a component in here regarding, we have many new initiatives regarding energy efficiency and in cost-saving measures. This new department will work towards doing that, and also as it pertains to sustainability. So that'll be the function of this new department.
Do I have any, anybody in opposition to this?
No.
Anybody in support?
Question?
Question?
In terms of sustainability, are you talking about making sure, are you speaking to the issue of making sure that there is funding to, say we build something new, to continue to be able to support the,
That's
whatever
correct.
that is?
Yeah,
Okay.
that will be one component of it. As I mentioned in the workshop, as we were talking about the public safety facility, they will be working into these bids that we push out to ensure that we have a comprehensive maintenance plan from day one for any new changes with infrastructure growth, as well as a comprehensive plan moving forward for the next 20 years. And so that will be part of that, as well as when we look at sustainability when it comes to, most recently passed was a bill in Augusta regarding packaging and the components as it pertains to being able to report out on that. This department would be part of that as well, to ensure that we are leveraging every possible tax credit that we could receive as a city, ensure we're moving in that same direction.
Thank you, and I just want to say that this sophistication of this is really extraordinary, considering who Auburn was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, even when I was here. So I thank you very much for doing this.
Anybody else in support or opposition? None being, I'm going to ask for a vote.
I have just one comment.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, short arms. As part of this environmental sustainability efforts for this new department, I think it would be really great to have a dashboard available on our website that showcases what our benchmarks are and our progress toward meeting them. South Portland is a really great model for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like to
Stand
ask-
by. Sorry.
Oh, no, you good? Okay. I need a roll call vote at this time, Ms. Eastman. I know you love it.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Next is an order to pay for it. Is an order 88-08022021, approving the allocation of $175,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act to execute the approved organization realignment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor McLeod with a motion, second by Councilor Boss. Anybody in the public like to speak? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any questions about this? Big part of this job will be to handle the projects with ARPA funds.
Yeah, I would just like to add, Mr. Mayor, that this is not just a single year. This will be over multiple years. We have until 2024 to obligate all ARPA funds, so this will be over multiple years. We will work to phase this into the city budget over those same years, but also this will be to fund any consulting costs for any new projects that we have coming in under this as well that are ARPA related. So that would be under.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clarification, you said this money is going to be put like into a fund and it's going to be used for multiple years to carry out the process of aligning this department and doing all the work it needs to do.
That's great.
And will there be any other parts unfunded, I mean, it's not funded with this, that's going to come out of the city budget?
So this new department, we are pulling engineering out of Public Works, and as I mentioned before, the purchasing agent out of finance. Those departments are already funding that. That'll continue. Those funds that are in the budget will continue funding those positions. They won't be coming out of these dollars.
Okay, so with that said, the monies that we just allocated in the budget we just passed, they will continue to fund. But then next budget, when the next council does it, the funds won't be in Ms. Eastman's budget anymore. It'll be in another account,
It'll be
right?
in this new department, correct?
Right, okay.
Yeah. And it'll
Thank
come
you.
out of those departments. So you'll see a reduction, but you'll see it added to the
Right,
new department.
thank you very
Correct.
much.
Yep.
Councilor Zania?
Mr. Manager, does this allow for any additional staff, or no, it's just for current staff?
This will allow for one additional staff member to be the director of this department.
Anything else? None being? And gonna need a roll call vote. This isn't personal preference, Joe.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Passed by a vote of 7-0. Next is ordinance 34-08022-021, amending the setback requirements in Chapter 14, Business Licenses and Permits, Article 18, Adult Use and Medical Marijuana Business Section 14-659. This is a first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Councilor McLeod, second from Councilor Boss. Okay. I'm going to open this up to the public for comment. None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any comment on this? Any questions first before we go into support? We had a workshop on this several weeks ago. We quantified this will actually move the setback to 2,000 feet.
I just had one question. Does this, or would this affect anybody that is currently seeking licensure or have business plans on file to open?
If they've already filed, they would be grandfathered with it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, none being, I need a roll call vote on this one too.
So, Mr. Mayor, to make it finally clear, this is to increase it so that the businesses can't be real close and kill
Correct.
people. Okay,
Current
that's
current
cool.
limitation is 1,000 feet. We're going to broaden that out to 2,000 feet.
Cool.
In practical sense, for everybody watching, this will limit the potential growth in the marijuana retail industry within Auburn. Ideally, we're projecting, I think, 20 businesses. We're up to 23, 25. Right around
We're
there.
right in where we.
We're right there. Yeah, we're good. So, or this would make it pretty much good. So, with that, roll call vote.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
and Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Order passes unanimously. Next is approving Order 89-08022-021, approving the mass gathering permit for the Bicentennial Parade to be held on August 21st, 2021. This is a public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Gary, second. Councilor Milks. I'll open this up to the public. Anybody like to speak? No? Bring it back to the council. Would anyone want to shatter the dreams of small children who are looking forward to a parade? Please speak now. Any other questions, comments? Anybody in support? Great. I think we need a roll call vote for this. It says right here, Jill. It says it right there.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Wholeheartedly.
Thankfully passes unanimously by a vote of 7-0. Next, second open session of the night. If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak about any topic not on tonight's agenda, please step to the podium, give us your name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing none, I'll now close the second open session of the night. We'll now continue to reports. Mayor's report, I really said everything under communications. So we'll move on for me. Council, anybody from the council has a report? Councilor McLeod?
I just had one comment now that we approved the mass gathering. LATC, the bus service will not be running that day, just due to the influx of people that will be in town. The buses would not be able to run while the parade route and all the people are around. So that is your mode of transportation. Just be mindful. They are working on shuttles, hopefully, but LATC as itself will be out of service for the day.
I'm going to bring it right back here on that report before I totally forgot this. I probably should have done this in communication. After consultation with city admin, looking at our agenda, we're going to be canceling the October 4th meeting. Our city manager and assistant city manager will be out of state at that time. We will be making this up probably fourfold, though, throughout the month of October and November with special meetings and workshops to go over items before the end of the session. So we'll definitely have that. So we're going to take a break on October 4th, so please make sure that your calendars reflect that. We'll have an update sent out as well. Okay? Other reports, starting on this side, Councilor Zania, Councilor Boss, Councilor Carrier.
I have two. The airport board will be meeting this Thursday at 5:30. I believe it's in this building, discuss airport matters. The school committee will be meeting Wednesday night at 6 o'clock in this building. And I did have one recognition that I wanted to make tonight for one of my constituents. Somebody who's given 38 faithful years of service to me. My wife, Candace, this is our anniversary. So you guys see where I'm at on my anniversary. She's a saint for putting up with me.
And on behalf of the city council, please accept these wonderful magnets. Anniversary gifts. I believe, what, 21 years?
Yeah.
It's a gift of magnet. So,
Yeah.
Go through the story. Very good. Any other reports? Councilor Walker?
I'm all set.
Good to go. Okay, we're going to move on to city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. First, you'll see that our Assistant City Manager, Brian Wood, is not here. Well, I'm very pleased to report that Brian and his wife Simone gave birth to a new baby boy, Max Wood. So he is born and healthy, and Mom and he are doing well. So, so Brian, I'm sure, is very busy.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he's watching. Good job.
And the last item that I have, it is required by city ordinance that if we deny a business license, we need to notify the council at the next meeting that a license has been denied. We denied a lodging house license at 63 Academy Street. The application that was submitted was denied based on multiple reasons regarding the state of the building. And so there is a letter that was sent to the licensee, and the process to hold an appeal has also been notified to the licensee with a 30-day option to write their appeal to you.